communication, like is it important in what they do? And here I've got Milton Kolas, and he's from the Amiga Driving School, and he's just going to tell us a little bit about himself. So, Milton.
Okay, well,
what do you do?
Well, I'm a driving instructor for the last 17 years. I also, for the last couple of years, have been working for the Australian Automobile Dealer Association as a coach for their program called Kids to Drive. And I coach driver trainers. And I also do the Kids to Drive lessons for parents and learner drivers. And it's really good. As far as my private life is concerned, I'm married, got a 13-year-old daughter, and I run the business with my wife. My wife's a boss. So we've got 8 driving instructors working for us, and I'm hoping to expand that over the next couple of years.
Oh my goodness, so you've got actually a few little multi-facets to your business. So
Yes.
You're not just a driving instructor, you actually run driving instructor trainings as well?
Yeah, it's a special course. To do this program called Kids to Drive, they need to be accredited. So it's an accreditation course. It's not the same accreditation course that they need to become driving instructors. But because it's a specialised program, so I mean that we're looking at changing the way that we approach driver training. We're basically trying to get as many driving instructors in Australia to look at this new method of training and adopt it.
Oh wow. So you're not just a busy man for 17 years running a driving school, but you're also a beloved husband and father as well. So there's lots of different areas of life that you have to contend with on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Now, I have to ask you, is communication important in anything at all that you do?
Yes, look, in work, it's very important. As far as dealing with, we deal with all age groups, we don't just deal with young people. Being able to communicate, get our message across to them in a good way. I mean, as long as communication is communication, but there has to be good communication. And it's got to be done in a way that people can understand and grasp. And I think one of the beauties of our industry is we deal with so many different sorts of people, all wanting to do the same thing, and that's learn to drive. And you need to be able to very quickly adapt communication skills with each individual person that you have in the car. So, yeah, it's pretty important.
Okay, because you just said that you've got like many different age groups learning to drive. So then, do you find that each one has a different learning style as well?
Yeah, we do. Look, we can get a great example I always have is if you get people who are professionals or academically minded, we find that they're normally a more difficult person to teach to drive because they seem to be a lot more analytical compared to a person who, and not nothing wrong with labourers, but someone who's a labourer. They tend to look at driving or pick up driving more as an artistic form, and they don't analyse every step of the driving, whereas a very analytical person does. And you've got to be able to pick that up, because if you can pick that up, you know how you're going to approach the learning process. Analytical people, you need to explain things, break everything down, whereas other people you can give a general idea of what they need to do and they grasp the concept. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
Wow, so even with all the different learning styles for all your learners, it's really a matter of understanding how to communicate in a way that they understand learning to drive.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's important. And we also have language barriers over the driving lessons as well. So that, again, you need to change your way of teaching to adapt to that. We always have people that have very little English. We have a bit of a barrier there, the language barrier. So you need to communicate in different ways. I mean, there might be a lot more stuff done on paper, a lot more diagrams drawn, more hand directions and things like that, because it's not the language barrier that's a problem. And yet we do get through it. We've got a couple of driving instructors who work for us, and one in particular, my father-in-law, who's just absolutely brilliant at dealing with people like that. Particularly doing it for 40 years, and he started off dealing with the Greek community in Brisbane, and he's always highly recommended with a lot of people. He gets a lot of referrals from from people who are coming in with overseas licenses because he's very good at working with people.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's really important too.
It is important, and that is, and look, I think communications is more than just voice. You know, you can communicate by diagrams, you can communicate by hand directions, and in our line of work, that's very important. You need to be able to do all of those. Yeah.
Now, I remember at one point you were telling me that there was a whole day of teaching blind people how to drive a car.
Yep.
Yes?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you actually communicated to these people so that they took the wheel?
Okay, now this is a really interesting one. We do a blind drive day. It gives blind people an opportunity to sit in the driver's seat of a car and actually drive in dual-controlled vehicles. And, you know, there is a little bit of involvement by the learner, the instructor, holding the wheel and things like that. But they're very, blind people are very sensitive to things. They've got a fourth sense, I guess you could call it. They notice things, they feel things a lot better than what we do as sighted people. So when they're driving, you explain the pedals to them, and it's amazing. You can explain the accelerator, the brake, and the clutch, and how to use it, and they learn to do gear changing, and they feel it. And it's amazing. You can just explain it once or twice about, you know, what to do with their feet, and all of a sudden they're just doing it. But the most amazing thing we all found was how quickly they adapted, and they could work out where they needed to start turning at certain places. And it's quite frightening to be sitting next to a person who's blind who's saying to you, so I go left about now, don't I? And they start turning, and it's almost exactly in the right spot. So it's quite a real amazing experience having this being in the car with them. And again, I think if we do our jobs well, and if we can explain the use of the pedals and the steering techniques and everything to them, even when they can't see, they can feel, they get that movement. And it'd be great to be able to adapt that into training with sighted people, because it's amazing. Kids, younger people in particular, they don't pick up those skills. I mean, that's really quick. I mean, you do 8 laps around Lakeside, and these people are starting to do gear changing unassisted. I've never seen that in a learner driver yet. So it's pretty amazing stuff.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So your communication ability would have had to have been very, very different with the people who were deaf.
Yeah,
blind.
Yes,
Blind.
yes, blind. Yeah. A lot more talking, consistently talking to them, explaining what was going on inside the car, and also the use of your hands on the steering wheel to show them how much to turn the wheel at certain points. So they kind of sensed after a while where they were on the track and be able to do it. And it was just mind-numbing. I mean, to this day, I still don't know how we do it, but it's quite amazing how if you just keep talking to them. But it got to the point where our conversation went on driving, but we were talking about other things while we were just driving around the course, and you know, we had a policeman there, and we were clocking our speeds down the main straight. And learner drivers don't get to do the sort of speeds that we were doing on those days, so it was a real through them.
Were they going?
We had some people up to 140, 150 kilometres an hour. Now, I must stress, we were in a controlled environment, and there was huge gaps between the cars. And we had police supervision, and we had track supervision, and everyone was there. And it was only on the straights, the rest of the circuit was going relatively slow. But it was fun. Yeah, it's always fun.
Oh no, okay. That's actually really awesome, because I've never ever been behind the wheel of a car with someone who's blind for driving, so that would be a whole different experience.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun, and they really enjoy it, and they always look forward to coming again. So yeah, we always look forward to seeing them again too. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
All right. So with your driving instructors, you have 8 of them.
Yes.
Do you communicate the same way to each and every one of them, or?
No, not really. I mean, everybody's an individual, so after a while, I guess you get to know their little quirks about each one of them. We've become pretty good. I've become very good friends with 3 or 4 of my instructors, and I'm very good friends with a couple, and been just good friends with others. But I think it's important in business, and especially in a small business, that you treat your staff more like friends than employees, because you're relying on them all the time. And in our business, they're subcontractors, and they pay me commission rather than me paying them the wage. And I need to maybe bend a little bit for them to keep them happy. But communicating with them, look, some people you need to be tougher with because they may approach things a little bit differently from how you want it. So then you've got others who kind of sometimes shrug their shoulders and say, who gives a damn, but you need to be able to change their attitude sometimes too. Yeah. So, yeah, it's important. You've got to be able to understand people and know how to approach each individual separately, because we're all individuals, and we can't all be treated exactly the same, so you have to set up that mutual.
Oh, absolutely. And you were saying that, sometimes it's a matter of just being a little bit flexible and bending a little bit with our contractors and not employees. So that's about, really, really listening to your staff,
you've got to listen. You've got to be able to listen to what their problems are. And everyone has problems, and in the current economic climate, everyone's got problems. But sometimes you've got to listen to what they're saying and always try and work out if you can find a solution that suits both of you, not just them. And because a lot of times people look for where naturally we want the best for ourselves, but sometimes you have to give and take a little bit. So you listen to what they want and you try and come up with a solution that suits both of us rather than your own. Because I have to think of my business as well. I've got to feed my daughter and I've got to feed my wife. I've got to pay my bills just like everyone else. So it is important that we find a
I'm really glad you said that. One of the things we teach, or I basically teaching, is making sure that both of you understand. And that's exactly what you've just said. You understand what your needs are as part of a business owner, as part of a husband and a family provider. And then you really truly listen to each of your staff members, and then you found solutions that meet both of them.
Yeah, that's what we try and find. It doesn't look, they don't always work, and it's like any business life where sometimes you just can't come to that agreement, but most times you can find some sort of a middle ground. Look, the best way to do it is say, look, all right, if that's what you want, go home, think of a way that we can solve this, and come back to me with an idea. Instead of me always trying to come up with the ideas, give them something to do and get them to think about it. And maybe then they can look at my side of things and go, well, hang on, that may not be fair to look. I mean, for example, we had an instructor a little while ago saying that he wanted us to increase to, no, that's right, he said if you increase the commissions, we're not, what was it? If we increase the commissions, they're not going to pay any more than what the previous commission was. In other words, they wanted the prices of their lessons up, but not increase the commission, which in those days was $1 amount. Now we charge a percentage, which is easier because if the interest rate, if the dollar amount of the lesson goes up, you're all going to get more in commission because it's a percentage. We used to have a dollar amount, so if it was a $40 lesson, they'd pay us $10 commission for a lesson. Well, they want to be this one guy wanted me to put the lesson prices up and I'll change the commission. And I said, well, put yourself in my shoes. Would you want somebody to do that? And he said, no. And I said, well, problem solved. You can't do it. You've got to look at both ends. Maybe it's one you something and not what the other side is. So we talked about that and decided on a happy medium at that stage. And that's when we actually put the percentage commission in, because it was already like profit for me. They were like, well, we're always paying more. We're going into your anyway. They don't know what's going on.
So when you're actually talking to everyone, like when you talk to one of your instructors, or when you talk to one of your kids when you're teaching them to drive, I think you've got a few stories. Or whether when you're actually teaching one of your courses as well, what would be like the most important thing to do?
Depends on what you do it. I guess it depends on what you're doing, but I think the most important communication skill isn't so much communication, being able to understand the people you're talking to, and being able to adapt what you want to do or say to them, so that it's something that they will understand. We have I guess when I'm in a classroom of driving instructors, you tend to want to hang around at the beginning of the day very close to them to hear what they're saying to one another when they're talking. And you listen to ones who may have political views about things in the industry, or you might be listening to some people who are just talking about the sort of clients they've got. And you can kind of single them out into little groups so that you know during the day what sort of things they're going to say to you, so you're preparing for that all the time. So I think being able to understand the people that you communicate with is number one. Number two then is being able to very quickly change the way you're thinking and you're communicating for each of those individuals. And it sounds like a very difficult thing. If you meet a total stranger in the street, you don't have time to work that out. But I'm a great listener. I'll sit back and listen to people. Might meet somebody, and then I'll just stand back and listen to them talking. And then I kind of will try and fit in that way. But I think what's important is you need to be able to change your thought patterns very quickly to match or to communicate across the people at different levels. And it's hard to explain what I'm getting at there, but it's a matter of listening first, I think, before you communicate, whenever possible.
Yep. Right. Okay, so listening first,
yep,
and understanding from the other's point of view.
Yeah, if you've got time to do that. Yep. Okay. I think another good aspect is when you're, I guess, a good example would be when I'm talking to a lot of particularly young men nowadays in the car, and they tend to grunt and groan. They don't speak up. They don't speak clearly. You've got to lean over and keep asking, what was that? What was that? I think you also, if you're going to, when we're talking about speech, communication through speech, you need to be able to speak clearly and fluently and speak up so that people can hear you rather than mumbling all the time, because mumbling just causes more and more problems. And if people say certain things, you may mistake what they said, and it mightn't have been the word they said. Or you might think they said something else and they haven't actually said that, and that can cause a lot of problems. I think there's a lack of communication in the world today too. I mean, I watch my 13-year-olds on the computers all afternoon. Everything is typed nowadays. There's very little communication. So they don't have good phone skills. They don't really have good communication skills with people outside the house. I mean, that disappoints me. I think we need to improve that with young people. That's a real necessity. It's very hard to communicate with somebody when you can't understand what they're saying.
Very important aspect.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, interesting. Do you see a lot of young people come to your school? First to come to report that students that are 16 years old. Yeah. And you're seeing a lack of communication ability.
Yeah, I find it all the time. Schools really put in school. And they speak English and understand what they're saying. They're quite open to trying different things. I used to do English, which basically works on that find your own way. Instead of us giving instructions, do this, do that, we kind of ask one more question. How did you feel through that situation? How did you do it better this time? Trying to get things a bit more about what we're doing in the past. Yours really good. They're very open to that. But there's nothing worse than next to a teenager. A teenager, there's nothing wrong with it, but they just sit there and you ask them a question and they'll just kind of go, and you go, just look at me, and you don't know, and they're going to know. And so, well, give it a try. You've got to learn to answer questions. You can't just keep saying to everything, I don't know, because how do you learn anything? Especially those words like, real common thing. And I've had parents say to me, but that's your job, you need to tell them. I said, well, they also need to go to work and tell them. Because when they're driving on their own, they can't, don't have anybody to be next to them they can ask, what do I do? So they have to hear that one. So that's what this thing is about. It's really is. I guess if you think about it, it's new style. There's a lot more communication required because there's going to be more discussion between the trainer and what they want to do. Part of the way the trainer is talking. And the learner being very happy to take the you're hoping to yeah, I think so, yeah, it's like I said, the boys very hard to communicate with, younger boys in particular, younger girls, not normally the problems.
Wow. So, would you say that communication is actually
Well, I believe this is, I think a lot of people that they're not talking about communication. They're not taking people that are right. I was watching the program on TV last night and they were interviewing some athletes in a family in Australia and I was listening to the three different brothers and it was amazing how differently they all respond to questions. You can tell the one that had the better education than the other two, just by the way they talk. When you ask, when you gave me an idea what you were asking, I actually thought of those three brothers and I thought, it's really great. You can tell the one that has the best education. You can really talk like that. And I think education program a lot to do with it. So if we don't learn communication, we're not going to that's communication. That's what it's about.
So when you say it's a skill, is this a skill that all of us always naturally, or is it something that we have to learn?
It's not have to learn. I was, through most of my being involved in training and many years before I was a driving instructor, I was training training staff. And when you do any sort of training courses or anything like that, they teach you about speaking and how to get your message across. And the output on sort of structure is that we all do. But you do think about public speaking and knowing how to talk to people. And I think through school, taking a lot of, I know my daughter had to do a lot of presentations that she has to get in front of the class at a very young age. And some people are really good at it, and they're the kids that are going to go up and communicate. Others aren't good at it, and it doesn't make them any worse than anything, but they'll never be public speakers or do anything in that line of work. So, yeah, I think it's a learned skill. It's not something, if you grow up in a family where there's lots of communication, lots of people talking and listening and stuff, I think it's something to learn.
The environment is really
Environment
as well.
well, yeah.
So if everyone in the environment, like the parents, really good at communicating with as well, that's going to be better.
Yeah, I think now in the same age group, a lot of the problems that we have in the industry, everyone gets to the fact that communication with young people is so important. I think that there's a lot of young people we don't, I know in the Greek community we have a lot, we do a lot with the elderly and not a lot with the youth. And I think we need to get into the youth and we need to talk to them about how to communicate, how to talk to them. They keep them told that a certain phone number they can ring to take them. I'm from an ethnic group that we don't see that as being an important issue. What we think is we need to be able to talk to them we need to get those skills across to young people. And I think that's something that's been lacking since the 70s. And I think it's very important that we try and change that, get practical skills back. So there's a lot of young people to stay on.
I'm actually really glad you said that, Milton, because I've done a lot of travelling myself, and it didn't matter where I went. I found that it was definitely communication that was lacking in this. And just touching on that, the environment's really important. So if the parents have got really good effective communication skills, then the kids are more likely to feel safe and coming to mum and dad, putting their hand up and going, hey, so I think it's pretty right with that. I think the environment really is very important, and I think parents do have a lot to say with the effective communication that kids grow up with as well. Definitely, because in my own experience, I found that a lot of kids will actually do what the parents do.
Yeah, that's right, and I see that myself. I had a young girl in my car one day from a very exclusive private school, and her language was absolutely shocking. I just couldn't believe it. And look, I'm a pretty open-minded guy when I go out with my mates. We're very typical guys, I guess, but to hear it from a young girl who's 16 years old, I was absolutely taken aback. And I said to her, I said, "Do you talk like that at home?" She said, "Yes." And I actually rang the parents and I said to them, "Well, your daughter used these two particular words." I said, "I wasn't very impressed." And she told me that she speaks like that at home. She said, "No one in the world." So she must be pretty, I guess it's a thing from school as well. I mean, I picked up my father has never sworn in his life, so all the bad language I picked up from my friends. But you kind of know your place, you know when to use bad language and when you can't. And that's where I think why I talk about that there's such bad communication skills with young people is they tend to think that certain language is an acceptable one in life, and so they'll use it everywhere. And they use it all in the wrong context, and a lot of times it causes problems. If they had tried to get their message across a little bit differently without using all the language, sometimes there wouldn't be as many problems as what there is. But it happens, and it's just a shame that we don't teach these skills a lot better at a younger age. So yeah, it is important.
And sometimes when you've heard a particular word, or even when you've heard other people talking to you and things like that, do you find that people put their own meaning on different words?
Yes, they do. I always think it's funny because of my ethnic background and knowing a lot of Greeks who English is their second language. It's really funny if you listen to them because they sometimes get the words wrong and they put them in the wrong context in their conversation, and that's quite funny. And it really is. They have no idea. They say it, they may pronounce it wrong, or they'll just put it in the wrong context altogether. So yeah, that's funny, But when they speak in their own language, they revert back to, I guess, they communicate very well in their own language. But I know of people who still speak with very strong accents, but their communication skills, their way of getting messages across is very effective. And very few people in a room, if there's 300 people in a room, and they can get up and speak, and they can speak with a very strong accent. They may struggle with some words, but they really are able to get that message across. And I think you can't always use language as a barrier and saying, well, I can't speak English very well, so therefore I can't tell people what I want to say. So I think it's important that we understand that because these people who are able to get their message across, even with broken English, or if we're in another country trying to speak their language, if we're really good, effective communicators, we're going to get that message across. And I think that's what important. Politicians do it all the time, particularly when they travel overseas. But they're taught to do that, and they need to have those good skills. So I think if it's important, why can't the average person also have those good skills? And I think in some industries it's improved. We were talking earlier about panel beaters many years ago, mechanics many years ago. You'd walk in and try and talk to a mechanic, and it was almost impossible, and it was really and it was even harder for women. But I think they've learnt now that they need to have good PR skills and good communication skills. Otherwise they're not going to get business, because people don't want to be spoken down to. Because you're not a mechanic and you don't really know much, they don't want to be spoken down to. So a lot of industries have realised the importance of good communication skills. And I think in the case of mechanics and people who are in trades, they are starting to teach them about the way to talk to people and how to sell themselves. And that's what good communication skills is all about. It's really, I see it as selling themselves.
Okay. So if there was something that if there was something that you want to tell the world, or all those kids out there, or your instructors, or even the parents out there, it's something about communication, what would you want to tell them?
Well, that's a good question. I think what I'd really like to tell people is that, number one, parents, talk to your kids a lot more. Don't treat them as children. When you name it, they're children. But you need to develop a good relationship. People say, you've got to become friends with your kids. I think you need to be a parent as well as a friend. And I think the parent part needs to be able to kind of take the friend part a little bit. It needs to be a bit stronger. You need to talk to your kids as much as you possibly can. And when they get to the age when they're on because of my expertise in driver training, I guess, you can't get into the car and expect them to know things. And that's where there's always a problem. Parents just think the kids know. They don't explain things to a lot of young kids. They just get them in the car and say, well, this is what you do. And because it's their children, they think their kids are going to just be able to do it. Because, my kid's the best kid, so therefore he's going to be a great driver, and it doesn't always work like that. And so it causes a lot of problems. So you need to have very good communication skills. You need to be able to talk to them on a nice, mild level, As for the young people, particularly young men, start learning to speak. Open your mouth and talk. Let people know what you're thinking. Don't keep walking around as if you've got the whole world on your shoulders, mumbling things. Talk to your parents, talk to your uncles and aunties, talk to your cousins. If you aren't happy with something, talk. Don't bottle it up and talk amongst your friends. I've just recently had a problem, heard of a problem with a family friend whose son got mixed up in all sorts of terrible things, and he had a medical condition from it. If he had just talked to his parents about what the problems were he was having, it would have solved a lot of things. So you need to have that communication. Without it, everything breaks down. If we don't have good communication, and you only have to look at the problems in the world. People don't communicate with each other, and everyone has different beliefs, and nobody wants to give in to other people's beliefs, and then it causes more and more problems. And so that can happen in normal society too. So I think that's important. You need to have those skills, and we need to make sure, particularly young people, I'd love to see some young men in particular learn to speak and speak out and talk to people. That's the most important thing.
Milton, I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to come into your office today and just ask you all these different questions.
That's fine. It was fun. It was interesting.
So, this is Milton Kolas from the Amiga Driving School, and I'm Chief Jewish from Training for Transformation, and this is our first street interview. So, I'm going to sign off until the next street interview. Have the most outstanding day.